Morning, and welcome to your Hillsborough County Metropolitan Planning Organization meeting. Will everyone please rise for the pledge and invocation?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Gracious and Heavenly Father, we're so thankful that you allow us to come out today to work to make decisions to make this county a better place for all of us to live, work, and play. We ask that you regulate our minds and humble our hearts to make these decisions to make the citizens have something that they can be very, very proud of. Father, we ask that you protect those that put their lives on the lines for us each and every day, whether they're first responders in this community or in the military uniform serving on this soil in this country or foreign soils. And when our work is done, we ask you to take us back to our homes to find everything safe and sound. These are all blessed. We ask you in your righteous and holy name. Amen.
Amen.
Before we move into public comment, I have a memo from Commissioner White. It reads, Commissioner Miller, I'm able to attend today's MPO meeting due to the unavoidable conflict. Please read the reasons for my absence into the record. We're going to try to be done by 10:30. I know we may lose a quorum by 10:30, including your chair. So we'll do our very best to get everything done by 10:30. If you see me kind of roll my eyes at you when you're speaking, that means cut it short. Okay, we're going to move into public comment. Now I have one speaker card, and that's Mr. Jim Davison.
Good
morning.
Mr. Chairman. I'll make it short. This here is the New Start Scope of Services template from the FDOT. It's the contract that the consultants would sign for the process you're currently going through, the T-car. So if you're not familiar with it, here's the pamphlet for the T-car. Hand this out, you can hand it around.
Over here.
My name is Jim Davison, 17823 Hickory Moss Place, New Tampa. In both of those manuals, the T-car manual and in the template that the consultant would sign, they require that the consultant supply both current year dollars and in YOE dollars to fulfill the contract. And they recommend that the YOE dollars are done in the T-car program. The reason that's important is that for the last couple of months, they've been advertising the cost. How do you expect the people, through the public comment, to make an evaluation of a project when you don't know the exact cost? You don't have the finance by their own admission, you don't have inflation, you don't have the NEPA studies, which can involve a great deal of money, and some of them up to $150 million. A great deal more money than you have. So I would urge you to get those numbers up front so that the public can look at how much it's going to cost and have a better judgment. You wouldn't go shopping this way. You wouldn't go out on the town and not know how much something's going to cost. It's just that the elephant in the room is not the FTA, it's not FDOT. It's the 1 million voters in unincorporated Hillsborough County that you're going to have to convince. And you're not going to be able to convince them if they don't trust the numbers you're giving them. There's some other things. We're in a hurry this morning. I'll take that up at a later time. But tomorrow we'll be unveiling a tax plan before the BOCC that collects $8.4 billion and does not raise 1 cent in tax, of which about $6.2 billion can go directly to transit. So I'll see you tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to address the board today? Anyone else? Okay, thank you. Moving to committee reports online, Ms. Torres.
Morning, Gina Torres, MPO staff. This should be fairly quick. For today's action items, your committees approved and forwarded the public participation plan, measures of effectiveness. They added recommendations to expand accessibility with real-time engagement, such as more live streaming of meetings. The regional transit feasibility plan comments, there were several offered, and that's going to be on your agenda today. We'll discuss that. But the policy committee did take up what the committees had said and offered that there's a lot of answers needed for the committees before moving forward. On your consent agenda, the TAC forwarded to the board a letter supporting the Upper Tampa Bay water quality enhancements and asked that those be considered with the in conjunction with the Howard Franklin Bridge project. Also on your consent is from the policy committee is the memorandum of understanding between TBARDA, DOT, HART, PSTA, and the MPOs, as well as the MPO Advisory Council's call for freight projects for 2018. The policy committee also discussed the MPO's executive director's annual evaluation and state funding for transit, and I think you've received those slides in your packet. There were several other reports heard in March. The Envision Tampa streetcar study generated a lot of interest, and there were questions about how that relates to the regional transit feasibility plan and TB Next and the Heights Mobility Plan. A presentation on the Virgin Diamonds that was really interesting, so much so that we've added it to your agenda in May, so you can hear that. The T-BAR to MPO directors discussed topics for the July 13th joint meeting with the Central Florida MPO Alliance, and that's going to be at HCC Plant City. Some of the topics include connecting Tampa and Orlando markets, how Brightline got started, and the TMA's tri-county growth scenarios. Lastly, the TMA leadership, the Tampa Bay Transportation Management Area Leadership Group, had a robust discussion on several topics: the regional express bus initiatives and project priorities, the regional transit feasibility plan, as you can imagine, right-of-way for CSX, interstate transit, and the regional coordination best practices study. There's a good summary of that already in your packet. So that was for your committees. We didn't have a whole lot of online. We had one Facebook post from Chris Vila talking about Vision Zero. Don't use that as to justify interstate widening, that the weaving from operational complexities on the TB Next project doesn't correlate to Vision Zero, according to his opinion. The vehicle miles traveled have remained stagnant. He had several comments, and you have the full comment here. I guess he also was talking about environmental impacts. That's all in your packet. And lastly, we had 6 emails. 4 were from Mauricio Rosas. He felt that for the regional transit plan, he went to the Innovation Summit and was really impressed with that, and quoted Vinnick as saying Tampa has so much going for it and we need to bring it to a higher level. That's why Mauricio is supporting 3 options for moving forward: rail, BRT, and expanded bus. He also pointed out that the city is the economic force in the region and that we're putting Tampa on the chopping block in favor of connecting Pasco and Pinellas County. 2 other emails, one from Jay Herndon, who is interested in the expansion of State Road 39 north of Plant City, and Beth responded to him about that. And Patrick Hill is a DOT employee who heard my presentation on Vision Zero and wanted to get involved as a citizen in what he sees as the when trucks are driving and they don't tie down their debris and it falls off of trucks on highways or cars or whatever. That was a concern of his, and I thought that was great coordination. I hopefully will work with him in the future on ideas of how to eliminate that problem. But those are your online comments.
Okay, any questions, Ms. Torres? Seeing none, thank you. Move the consent agenda. You have items A through E on the consent agenda.
Second.
There's a motion by Commissioner Merman, second by Councilman Maniscalco to approve the consent agenda. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise. Motion is adopted. Action items. Comments on the Regional Transit Feasibility Plan. Good morning.
Morning, members of the board. I'm Rich Clarendon with the MPO staff. Today I'm going to bring to you some questions and comments that have been raised on the Regional Transit Feasibility Plan. As you remember, that was presented at your last meeting, and this is a presentation to follow up on that. As you recall, this is a regional plan that's now going through a public comment phase. It's getting a lot of attention throughout the region. The Transportation Management Area Leadership Group and others have been looking to us for an opinion about how this would fit with our objectives. A lot of questions raised, some by you all, some by members of the community. So this is really an attempt to sort of capture all of that and put it into a written form with the idea that we would transmit these questions to the study team as well as other agencies to begin to get some answers. So the first comment or observation that we think it's appropriate to make on this plan is that it does involve an offer by the state to develop transit facilities in the interstate right-of-way, which is kind of a first for our region, and we think that's something that is valuable and not to be passed up lightly. So One of the examples we can bring to you from another community that's taken this bus only shoulders idea and really run with it is the Minneapolis-St. Paul Twin City area in Minnesota. And they have created something called Team Transit, which involves not only the state, but also a whole host of transit agencies in that region to develop what really is a very extensive system of shoulder running buses throughout that region. And you can see from the graphic here, it covers virtually every limited access highway in that community. This didn't develop overnight. They've been at this for almost 30 years, 25, 30 years. They continue to add shoulder running lanes. And there are other facilities as well. They have an extensive system of park and ride facilities, for example. So how is this working? It does save travel time considerably for people riding the bus compared to standing in traffic, perhaps, on congested facilities. And the majority of travelers who use this are aware and perceive travel time savings, and that has translated directly into growth in ridership, especially over the last couple of years when throughout the nation ridership has sort of tailed off in other communities. We do have some questions about the specifics of the plan that was put forward to you. Number one having to do with, are we trying to do too many things at once? And maybe not doing any of them particularly well. So as an example of what I mean by this, consider that express buses on the interstate best serve longer trips, regional in nature, with fewer stops, largely oriented towards commuters, with stations that are built right into the interstate right-of-way, perhaps elevated, and served by transit hubs at strategic locations like downtown, University area, West Shore. Contrast that to the what we call arterial bus rapid transit, which is more locally oriented. It serves really your core transit market with street level stations and trips that are shorter, perhaps less than 10 miles in length. And so one of the considerations is if we're using express buses and trying to travel at speed, do we have to exit the interstate to serve street level stations? So just consider, for example, coming up to Martin Luther King Boulevard, having to stop, negotiate several traffic signals, get around to a nearby station location, and this is hypothetical, I might add, but it gives you an example, get back on the interstate, and then continue north within the interstate right-of-way. If you do that repeatedly, how much time is going to be added to the trip? That's one consideration. By contrast, if the stations are built right into the interstate, how do you get pedestrians, cyclists, and transit riders safely into that envelope where they can access the shoulder running buses? We do know that stations next to the interstate have been used in other communities, usually coupled with suburban park and ride lots. So there's some examples from other cities that we think are worthy of consideration. But will they work in this situation where we're trying to serve both outlying suburban areas as well as urban stations that might rely more on people walking or biking and taking other buses up to these stations? So both arterial bus rapid transit and interstate express rapid transit are implied by the plan that was put forward. Both are proposed in the 9-mile stretch of I-275 north of downtown Tampa. How are they going to work together? Are they going to compete with each other, or can they complement each other? We think there's a case to be made for looking at them together as a package to ensure that they do complement each other and each serve its respective markets well. And further, we think there's an opportunity maybe to leverage our dollars by bundling them together and perhaps making one grant application as opposed to two or several. Improving regional transit is important, and we think we should look at that seriously, but we don't think it should happen at the expense of local bus service that's rather underfunded. So setting up a robbing Peter to pay Paul sort of situation. We've all seen the headlines about sort of the minimal nature of regional bus transit in this area. We don't want to add to that problem. So, where the dollars are going to come from to consume, will they consume local dollars or not? I think that's a real consideration that we need to think seriously about. We'd like to see if there's an opportunity maybe to grow the pie, maybe look at public-private partnerships for station development, grants that do require a local funding match, but how do we make that a net increase for transit? So this is likely to come before the Board of County Commissioners for their support, and we think it's important to demonstrate, how the unincorporated area and county residents can benefit from these transit improvements along sort of this spine system. So one of the things we'd like to suggest to you is looking more broadly at strengthening shoulders on the freeways throughout the region, maybe not just in this corridor, maybe in a phased sort of way, and consider other opportunities to develop bus rapid transit to some of these outerlying communities, not directly on the spine. Sort of a corollary to this question is who's going to implement? Does it make sense for T-BARTA to be the only implementer? There's a whole question of the relative advantages of rubber tire versus steel wheel transit. We'd like to know and dig into really what the research says about the ability of bus rapid transit to influence land use, redevelopment, and economic development around some of these station locations. What would they return on investment? What does the research say about their relative attractiveness to riders, and why might that be? And particularly in this case, operating in the interstate right-of-way, does that have an effect on some of these factors? One of the other corridors that's a front runner, but not necessarily the recommended alternative, is the CSX corridor. We think there's some value in preserving this as a future right-of-way asset. We do know that the downtown to the USF travel shed is very congested today. Very little opportunities to actually expand right-of-way for transportation purposes. There's a whole host of questions about negotiating or leveraging this corridor with CSX. What do they consider to be the appraised value? What do we consider it for transit purposes versus freight? Will CSX negotiate with anybody other than DOT? There are other examples, other lines beyond just this corridor between downtown and the university area. For example, South Tampa has been raised as a possibility. Is there a possibility to negotiate for a larger system that could be developed over time? A whole bunch of other questions have come before us related to bus rapid transit. Where has it been implemented as a catalyst project, and what other capital investments were necessary to make that work? And then the timing question, for example, does it take less time to develop a bus rapid transit system of this nature compared to rail? We'd like to dig into some of those assumptions. The relationship of the Catalyst project to some of the supporting transit services, I think, is critical. We know that both HART and PSTA have been looking and moving forward with cross-county express services. These are incremental steps in our view to develop a more regional vision. And then there's the whole question of how much is this Catalyst project dependent or supported by local connections to get that last mile service. You're going to hear about one of them later in today's meeting, the Envision Tampa streetcar project, but there are other examples in West Shore and downtown as well. Implementation and next steps. I think this is another series of questions that we should be able to dig into. Does this have to be going forward as one big project, or can it be phased and segmented over time? Are the shorter segments ones that perhaps could qualify for the small starts project, which is an FTA funding category that has, frankly, less competition than the New Starts program? There is a set aside in DOT's work program of $5 million to move into the PD&E or project development phase on this. Can other projects compete, or not compete, but request a portion of this $5 million set aside, maybe to look at some other corridors? So can agencies propose projects on other lines in the regional transit feasibility plan besides just that major spine project? And would they be able to perhaps use other funding beyond just the FTA New Starts or Small Starts projects? Lastly, what role should the TMA leadership group play in sorting this out and ensuring that the New Starts or Small Starts applications that do go forward don't compete with each other in DC? So your advisory committees did take positions. The Citizens Advisory Committee supported the list of questions that were brought forward. They also asked about the impact of the Catalyst project to create jobs, and also raised the question of how reliable is the federal funding that we're going after. The Technical Advisory Committee supported the list of questions, wanted to know, though, is it always necessary for us to have to choose between BRT or rail, or could the two go forward together? And then lastly, they asked about the timing. When will this come back as a plan for committee action? So in summary, we've raised a lot of questions. We realize that we need to get some answers. We'd like to put those questions on the table with the study team, as well as the TMA leadership group, T-BARTA, HART, and others, and request that the TMA leadership group work together to bring those answers back to you. So that is our recommendation today. If there's questions, I'll be happy to try to answer them.
Mr. Clarendon, thank you very much for such a comprehensive report. We appreciate it. Are there any questions? Any questions? Okay. What's your pleasure?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Merman, second by Councilman Maniscalco to accept the report given by staff. Any questions on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, let me know by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, likewise. Motion is adopted. Thank you very much, sir.
Mr. Chair, I just want to point out.
Use your mic. Use your mic.
Thank you for the benefit of the board. I think we talked about this for about an hour and a half at the policy committee meeting. So there was just a very, very long and robust discussion about the topic. So I just wanted to make sure people in the audience knew that the lack of conversation here didn't indicate a lack of pretty thorough discussion earlier in the week.
Thank you, sir. Public participation 2016-17 measures effectiveness report.
Mr. Chairman?
Sorry?
I'm
sorry.
sorry.
I'm sorry. Wait.
Late follow-up question. Can our executive director sort of give us an idea of how, as these questions get vetted, I mean, what is that process for the board? How do we interact with, with this discussion about addressing these issues that were brought up?
Great question. So The TMA leadership group has been looking to this board for some feedback about, how do we see this playing into the regional perspective and also into our community's plans and priorities. Now that we have something specific that we can say to them from this board as a whole, that allows us to then have a conversation about the region's priorities, about the Tri-County area's priorities. And I am hoping that the next thing that happens at the TMA leadership group is we start talking about a pipeline of transit investments, a pipeline or a hopper, whatever you want to call it. But these would be the major projects that we see our region working together on for the next 10 years, 20 years, lining up what are the strategic investments in our Tri-County plan. And so we've talked, we've laid on the table the idea of there may be phasing or segmentation of this 41-mile interstate bus rapid transit corridor. We might need to look at a corridor that serves the unincorporated area. We might want to include how do we start working with CSX and get more information about what would it actually take to preserve that right-of-way for the future, including the streetcar extension, which you're going to hear more about later on the agenda, as one of those investments. We have more as a region, and we have more in our long-range plan than just this one project. And so we need to start having that conversation. And I think it starts at the TMA leadership group, it comes back here, goes back to the TMA leadership group, it comes back here. And that's going to be our plan of work for the next year.
Just as a follow-up, I guess my main concern is whether or not a lot of these issues or questions that were raised, will they be addressed in a more integrated manner or a isolated or fragmented or piecemeal manner?
So the Regional Transit Feasibility Plan team will develop a response as they finalize their plan. So they are in the phase right now of accepting comments in the plan, making changes based on the feedback they receive, and then there will be a revised plan that comes out later in the summer.
Okay.
Hold up, please.
Okay, go ahead.
Was it addressing what she was talking about?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to say, for those of us that are on the TMA leadership group, at least in my view, we need to actually use this document in such a way that everyone has something that they can go to sort of as the master guide to everything that's going on. I'm very frustrated by the fact that we haven't had like a master narrative like this, and I think it's important to just take this and literally start answering the questions and keep it on a document that we can all continually go back to. Just my opinion.
Commissioner Kemp, you're recognized.
Thank you. This obviously is a year's worth of discussion, answering some of these, which is what we talked about when we talked about it at the policy committee group. I also had stated, and I would like everyone here to know, I guess, that I thought there was some disconnect in many ways between, I'm on all these different committees, T-BARDA, and what they're doing and where they're going, and what we're doing here at the MPO, and what I'm hearing everywhere. One of the disconnects, just in terms of the information we're getting and presentations, they did a presentation on shouldering, which I had talked about at some length, and I thought we needed a better presentation on shouldering as they gave. I won't go into it, so that people have a realistic idea. I think it's concerning to me what is funded in the highway project by the Federal Highway Administration and what is expected transit. I know you dealt with some as one of the questions, local versus other funding sources, because ultimately, as I understand it, this is coming to the county commission to fund, and as we all know I have great questions about it. Some of the, I appreciate the remarks made earlier, questions about the financing, because I'm very unclear about any of the financing that's been presented to us at any of the meetings I've been to. But finally, I think one of the really, really important things for us to understand here in Hillsborough County is that they're asking for our taxpayer dollars to, as far as I can tell, our taxpayer dollars, our commitment that we do have for our local, which is meager, as it's been said, for our local transit to go to this this project. But second, they've talked about federal opportunities. And our federal opportunities, we hear one and done. It's not one and done, but very much so. We had a group of people that went to Washington, talked to the FDA, and it is, in many cases, one and done. And I think right now, Pinellas has had a project that looks very far up there, a BRT project locally, which I think is an excellent project. And they're going to get that money for that. I hate to see us forego good opportunities in favor of this, because I think we need to realize that if we apply our dollars, or if we put our opportunities for federal dollars and matching dollars in this, we do forego other opportunities, and that's what they were told by the FDA. So I think it's really important to understand that as we move forward.
Ms. Scherberger.
Thank you. How is this being transmitted? Is it going to be a letter, or are we actually transmitting this PowerPoint? What's the format? I'm just curious about how that's going to work.
Intended to write a letter, but if it's a board pleasure, we can transmit the entire PowerPoint.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't mind seeing either seeing the letter before it goes. Can we all see the letter before it goes and just see how this all ends up being translated into that? Because I feel like there can be subtleties in words, and I just want to say that, you know, the airport. It's good that we're having the discussion, and the airport cares a lot about our entire regional transportation system because we're a part of it. We have literally 80,000, more than 80,000 people a day who come to and from the airport, and 7,500 of them work there. And they come from all over, Pinellas, Pasco, people come from Sarasota. So it's important that we assist our entire region, as well as find ways to invest in the local projects that support the regional system. So as Joe has said many times, I'm speaking on his behalf, but this 275 rapid transit, I'm not calling it a bus rapid transit because I'm not sure it's a BRT yet, but a rapid transit is, you know, one important piece of this entire system. And it's good for us to keep pushing to figure out how it integrates with our local projects, as well as figuring out how to make sure that it's as good as it can be. So from the airport, I just want to say all that.
Thank you. When your point being about the letter, I'm going to request staff to email the draft letter to all of you, and then you can get back with staff on your comments concerning the letter. Whether we also in there, whether you feel it needs to be just a letter or the entire presentation that we received today. So you need to do that, okay? Commissioner Merwin, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm glad you brought that up, Janet, to have us review that letter. I'm probably not in favor of us sending this PowerPoint per se. We had this robust discussion for an hour and a half, and I felt that it was more negatively toned. And if we are going to send the questions, I'd like to have them be more in a positive framework, because I don't think any of us are ready to take a solid position on this. The thing is evolving, but there are questions that have to be asked. Councilman Cohen said that very thing. I mean, we need financing questions, all the reliability, the stations, shoulders, all the information needs to come. It will come. I believe that's why they're going out to the public hearing. But I guess I brought that up at the policy meeting. I don't want to rehash that, but that was my feelings about when I first saw the slide presentation. Thank you.
Councilwoman Rivera.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I think that to build on what Commissioner Merman said, that we need to really know what all of our viable options are and the costs of all of them. Like, for example, what would be the cost of a true BRT with a true dedicated lane? I think that Mrs. Scherberger said it very correct, and that we presently are not debating or evaluating what is known as true BRT. We got to know what that costs. We got to know what that costs in terms of funding mechanisms, in terms of down the line burdens on taxpayers 10, 20, 30 years from now, because the upkeep on something that's being evaluated right now as opposed to true BRT, so to speak, is significantly different. I also want to continue to keep our eye on the ball of a transit connector between the University of South Florida area and downtown. Something that, when we talk about transit projects that will revitalize and invigorate local areas, I don't think you can get more revitalization or invigoration than a transit connector between University of South Florida and downtown Tampa. Just if you read the Tampa Bay Times editorial, I think it was Easter Sunday, they talked a great deal about the innovation going on in the USF area. I think that by connecting that USF with downtown Tampa, we could really help further light that spark for the potential that exists out there. So we got to keep that discussion alive, a discussion that's going to benefit, by the way, a lot of lower income, working, blue-collar families that live in the USF area, as well as the many businesses that are out there. Thank you.
Ms. Scherberger.
Yeah, and I also just want to follow up on Commissioner Merman's points, and that's 100%. I was thinking the same thing, that what concerns me is that this comes across as overly negative. I think there's some really valid points in there and great questions that need to be answered, but what I'm concerned about is that it comes across as being that we're saying this is just flat out a bad project, and from the airport's perspective, we believe that it can be better and it needs to be integrated, but I wouldn't want the board, from the airport's perspective, we wouldn't want the board to be sending out something that makes it sound as if we're rejecting it or feeling that it's not worth continuing to move forward with.
Councilman Corn.
So I agree to a point, but this is the thing. I think it's really important for Pinellas and Pasco County to see what the questions are that are being asked in Hillsborough, because we are in a bit of a different place on this project geographically than they are, and it doesn't have to be this way and be negative, but I do think we need to find a way to ask for more information, making it clear that the reason we're asking for more information is so we can fully vet and evaluate all of our options. And if one of them is how asking for federal funding for multiple pieces might affect the chances of different things getting funded, I think we have to ask that question too. And I think the more specific we are and the more thoughtful we are in the way that we ask those questions, the more it will come through that we are trying to be, we are wanting to push it forward. But we've got to justify it and vet it. That's all. Thanks.
Mechanic, you recognize.
Mr. Chairman, maybe to add to this discussion a little bit, I don't know that it's our place to be negative or positive in these questions. They should be objective. Mm-hmm. I mean, what we're doing, some of the questions appear, what you would say in court is you're leading the witness, you're presupposing some answers, and I would just ask if we could make the questions objective. That's really what we should be trying to accomplish here.
My understanding, the policy committee had an opportunity to look at this. Am I correct? And I'm hearing from looks like the majority of this body that we need to stop leading the witness and have these questions more objective and answer the questions. So my question is now, should we refer it back to the policy committee and let them look at it again? Or should we appoint an ad hoc committee of this body to look at the questions and bring them back? Commissioner Merman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think staff can just reword the questions. I mean, you heard us loud and clear at the policy meeting. And I think if you reword the questions and send them out with a draft letter, let us look at it and offer our opinions. I think that I would rather do that, not hold it up to go back to the policy committee, though I'm not opposed to that, but I think we can achieve it this way. It's not a whole lot of work that needs to be done, it just needs to be more objective wording.
Ms. Scherberger.
I just want to say one more thing, well, maybe only one more thing, you never know. But I agree with, that sounds good to me, what Commissioner Merman just said, and I just quickly on the FTA question, that's not a discussion for this group to have necessarily, but it's 100% correct. I would think that we need to understand sequencing as a region, because that's how it has to happen. That you look at that RTFP, and there are a ton of great projects in there. A lot of things are in the works right now. And we can't do them all at once, but we need to do them all at some point. But that's for the TMA or TBARTA, whomever, to have that conversation.
The next TMA meeting's May 11th, so I'm sure we can get this done before then.
Yes.
I mean, we have time.
Is it,
So how about if I prepare a draft within the next week, transmit it out to the board members, and if any board member would like a discussion of this at the policy committee, that'll be in plenty of time to schedule that. And then that would be at the end of April, would still be before our May TMA meeting.
so you're going to send the letter draft and the revised question draft comments, am I correct?
Sir.
By next week. Is there any objection to that? No objection?
Right.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mayor Lott.
Thank you. Has the county commissioners, have they had a workshop on this themselves? Because, I respect the work this body does and so forth, but at the end of the day, it goes back to the county commissioner. So, I mean, at some point in time, I think I would like to hear, maybe the other members like to hear, where do the county commissioners sit on this? Because we can work on this 2 or 3 years, but if the county commissioners aren't willing to push things, it's not going to happen. So,
We have not had a workshop on this. We have not addressed this at all.
do we know where the county commission stands on this issue?
I don't think so, because first of all, we can't talk to each other. We haven't seen this, it hasn't come before us, so, I mean, I don't think there has not been a determination by any member of the county commission or the county commission as a whole as to what the feelings are of the commissioners on this. Commissioner Merman.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, we will be having a workshop on this, I think.
We will?
At some point, because, I mean, I have talked with our administrator on this, and I just felt like we need to get some of these questions fleshed out before it comes to our body. And I think that's a good 6 months away, or 6 months, if then. But it'll be up to, each commissioner, but I do think it will need to be workshopped at some point, absolutely.
Well, with all due respect, and I do appreciate the hard work in the commission, I have all the respect and work for our county commissioners and so forth, but, you are the leadership on this, and we're just a piece of the pie, and I would prefer going forward for us to really know where's our county commissioners on this project, in any of these transportation projects, so that we can then either jump on board and support it or say that we don't support it, because I kind of feel like we're in reverse. We're working on projects and so forth, but at the end of the day, it's our county commissioners that's going to decide whether we're going to move forward or not. So that's just my opinion, and hopefully no one takes offense to that or not ever, but I respect the county commission, I respect your leadership, but we're at your mercy, So.
Commissioner Merman.
Thank you.
Surprise us some more?
And, no, I'm not into surprising. The one question is, the Hillsborough portion of the plan, Commissioner Kemp's been very vocal about this, and I do agree with her that the Hillsborough portion of the plan needs to evolve, and there needs to be more in it. for Hillsborough. And that's what I think we're waiting to see is what's that going to be before. But it is a regional plan. Until we get a funding proposal from TBARDA that says, here's what we need from Hillsborough County Commission to fund this regional plan, I don't believe that we're going to, I mean, we don't have anything to discuss at this point, other than the Hillsborough portion of it and opining back to TBARDA that we need these questions answered before we can even talk about funding. And I think that's the process that needs to happen is TBARDA's running the show on this regional transit plan. But absolutely. They've been given the full authority by the legislature to do that. And, but I will tell you that, you know, a lot more needs to happen in Hillsborough before I can move forward.
Mr. Kemp, be recognized.
There's just, I was surprised that it was presented with so little information, honestly. And I've asked for a lot more information, and I've not gotten it. I don't see even how you could possibly move forward at this time, honestly, on anything. But also the entanglement and the bureaucratic confusion that has been caused by this whole multi-agency charge that's super unclear because TBARDA can't possibly move forward with the thing because they have no money. So they would have to rely on us. So the County Commission of Hillsborough County, I feel at some point, we and the MPO and HART have to take the reins here. We're the biggest county. We're the growing county. We have the most investment. We have the young workforce. We have the minority population. We are the center of this, and yet it's we're the tail being not the dog. And I think it's really so backwards. It's very confusing. And I wouldn't say that the jurisdiction is necessarily in TBARDA, though the state said that, because they don't have any money to do anything. And they can't do it without our support moving forward. So I just want to say that in terms of the way this is a bureaucratic tangle that I don't think anybody understands or knows how you move forward quite on this.
You know, anybody else? I feel with the comments we're making that we probably should not have approved what the staff just brought forward, because we approved what they brought forward. Now we have a discussion that what they presented is not really what we want to hear or what we want to say. So I would like for us to reconsider the motion that passed, supporting what the staff said, what the staff put forth, and leave it pending until staff reworks the questions, gets them to us with the letter, and I think we need to bring that back in our May meeting. Okay? So,
I'll move to reconsider.
okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
There's a motion to reconsider the vote motion by Commissioner Merman, second by, I think, who was it? A couple of people down there. To reconsider the motion by which the Regional Transit Feasibility Plan question and comments were passed. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, let me say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, likewise. Motion is adopted. So, we're back on the presentation, and I would suggest that we just temporarily postpone it until the staff redraws the questions, rewrites the questions and the letter, and get them to you within the next week. You review them, make comments, and bring that back to the meeting in May. Is that okay? Any objection to that? Fine, thank you.
Because it's before the team meeting.
Okay.
So we're good.
All right, very good. Anything else on that? Okay, very good. Public participation 2016-17 measure of effectiveness report. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, members of the board.
policy committee. I want to come in. On that policy.
Morning, everyone. I'm Brandon Berry, MPO staff technician, and I'm here with the Public Participation Plan Measures of Effectiveness Report for the 2016-2017 cycle.
Can you speak up?
Sorry.
Can you speak up?
Oh, sorry.
Are you nervous?
No.
You sure? What else to make you nervous? I'll go ahead.
The Measures of Effectiveness Report, MOE, is the MPO's biennial performance evaluation for its public engagement practices. It's a way of reflecting on and improving our public outreach. And the results of this report leads to the refinement of the public participation plan, which is subject to a 45-day public review period. So we have 4 measure of effectiveness categories. The first is visibility and productivity. This refers to the output of the MPO, the products, as well as the efforts taken to engage the public in those products. One of the standout measures in this category in the last cycle was new engagement opportunities. The MPO launched the School Transportation Working Group back in April 2016. Vision Zero had great public turnout at its 4 action track workshops and the numerous committee and community meetings where it was presented. And the MPO has also expanded new opportunities to engage in the Transportation Improvement Program public hearings each summer. Back in 2016, it launched a live stream with a chat box, and in 2017, it set up an English-Spanish phone TIP hotline. Our second measure of effectiveness is opportunities to participate. The MPO has participated in more events than ever before in the previous cycle, and it's almost doubled the number of events it's held in environmental justice areas. These are areas of the county that are low income, high minority population, and high Hispanic Latino population. Our third measure of effectiveness category is public feedback. The MPO has expanded its use of social media engagement over the last cycle. It continues to host an MPO board event 1 week prior to every meeting. This is for members of the public who might not be able to attend. They can leave a comment, which is, of course, transmitted to the board. The MPO has also expanded its use of Twitter over the last cycle. It's still one of the most followed MPOs in the country on Twitter. And the number of engagements with users, things like Twitter users following links, viewing our website through Twitter has grown as well. Our final category is public input results. 2 of the standout projects from the last cycle were Vision Zero and Walk Bike Plan 5. And what was unique about these projects is that they were brought to the board by members of the public. Vision Zero was brought forward by bicycle and pedestrian safety advocates led by Walk Bike Tampa, and Walk Bike Plan 5 was brought forward by the Green Artery Neighborhood Coalition here in Tampa. So every cycle we make recommendations for the upcoming cycle. The next cycle will cover the remainder of this year as well as 2019. These are more process-oriented recommendations. They don't necessarily directly result in measures, but they're ways of soliciting greater public involvement and feedback. Our first recommendation is to seek immediate feedback. This includes soliciting comments from individuals living in communities of concern, which was identified in our Title VI Non-Discrimination Plan update. Our second is to utilize new technology. Third is to promote a unified message for projects, specifically the 2045 Long Range Transportation Plan, Regional Transit Feasibility Plan, and Tampa Bay Next. This is so that a member of the public who attends a meeting related to any one of these 3 projects can have a question answered on either of the other 2. Our fourth is to coordinate data products. Fifth is to provide an acronym glossary and just overall reduce acronym use. This was a recommendation made in our federal certification report last year, and we're working on an online acronym glossary that we will launch alongside the public participation plan. We also recommend offering more training sessions, researching best practices, and expanding social media use. Our ninth recommendation came from the Citizens Advisory Committee, which is to offer new online access options. This specifically relates to the streaming of meetings, and we're going to evaluate what we can do about offering additional meeting streaming. So we request your approval of the Measures of Effectiveness report, and thank you. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions? Mayor.
On the Vision Zero, and I believe it was 2 months ago that as a body,
we approved that, and I had some discomfort at that point because the metrics we were looking at were not improvement points, but really an average. So with your point number 4 on coordinating data products, is there a goal around Vision Zero for actual improvement? And again, I know at some point there's got to be that beginning point, but I left the meeting a little uncomfortable that the average is our goal and not a real improvement.
I may have to defer on this one, I'm sorry. Beth?
Why don't I take that question? Brandon is our intern this year. We've been very happy to have him. He's a student at USF in the master's program. So you're referring to the action that the board took in setting a 1-year target for our crash statistics. So that is, it's a target that's required by the Federal Highway Administration to look at, what are our crashes per million vehicle miles traveled at the end of the calendar year. And it has to tie back to the projects that are in our transportation improvement program. And that's how it is enforced, if you will, that it be a realistic goal. So where we are right now is holding the line on the rate of crashes per million vehicle miles of travel. And it would be great if we could get more aggressive than that, but even that is an accomplishment when we look at our peer communities who are all experiencing those crash rates getting worse, probably because of challenges like distracted driving. So we are going to be having a much more detailed report at the board meeting next month about what this organization is doing in partnership with the DOT and all the local governments to address our safety performance metrics.
If I may.
Mayor, were you done?
Yes, sir.
Councilman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Berry just wanted to say you did a good job. So he's an intern from USF?
Yes.
Well, good job. I graduated from USF, and you present very well. How old are you?
I'm 27.
Good for you. Well, you did a good job. I just wanted to say that. An intern, that's a big deal.
I'm not done yet. Hold on. I got about 20 questions. So the first one, where'd you get your undergraduate degree?
So, I'm sorry?
Where'd you get your undergraduate degree?
New College of Florida, down in Sarasota.
And you're working on your master's at USF?
Yes.
Okay, I'm just kidding, man. I wouldn't do that to you. You're a fellow bull. Any other questions? Yes, Sherburne.
Oh, no question, just a comment. I'm also a USF grad. But I also just want to say that I think this is a great program, and the MPO definitely has a really, really strong social media program. It's very impressive, so keep up the good work.
Mr. Green?
That's okay. I found it in the packet.
Okay,
Thank
all
you.
right. Seeing no more questions of this budding student at USF, which I'm a bull also, and New College used to be a part of USF. I don't know if you knew that. What's your pleasure?
Move approval.
There's a motion by Commissioner Merman, second by Councilman Maniscalco. Any further discussion? All those in favor, let them remember saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise. Motion adopted. You're lucky. We almost killed it.
Thank you all.
MPO Executive Director's Annual Evaluation. Mr. Cameron.
Good morning, board members. For purposes of this presentation, I really wish I'd gone to USF too. Sadly, I did not. This very briefly, I'll present the Executive Director Evaluation. Per the Chair's direction last year, I'll be doing the evaluations going forward. In your blue folder is a copy of the compilation I did for the evaluations. Of our 16 board members, I got a total of 10 responses, 9 of which utilized the grading format that's on the form here. And just to briefly explain, to show you for question 1, for instance, in the 3 categories, outstanding, meets standard, or needs improvement, 3 of the board members voted outstanding, 6 meets standards, and none for needs improvement. There's space for additional comments under each category. If there are, for instance, under category 1, there are no comments because none of the board members made additional comments in that category. However, at various points throughout the evaluation, you'll see board members' comments transcribed verbatim under that category. At the end, there was space for additional comments that any members wished to make. My requested motion would just be for the board to receive the evaluation compilation, and it would then be transmitted to the Planning Commission director because pursuant to the MPO director's contract, she is an at-will employee of this board. However, for administrative purposes, which is to say salary and benefit, she's employee of the Planning Commission. Any questions? I'm happy to take them.
Any questions? Seeing none, may I have a motion to receive the report? Motion by Commissioner Merman, second by Councilman Cohen. Receive the report of the Executive Director's evaluation. See no further discussion. All those in favor, let me know by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, likewise. Motion is adopted. Status report, Envision Tampa Streetcar Study. Mr. Martinez, City of Tampa, good morning.
Hi, my name's Steve Shoecraft. I'm here on Milton's behalf.
Okay.
With HDR Engineering and also a USF graduate. By the way.
All right.
Let me get my right spot.
A little strong this morning, aren't we?
PhD program at USF.
So we were requested to come and make a brief status report on the project of the Envision Tampa Streetcar project. We've gone through the other committees, so many of you have seen this presentation by Milton previously over the last several weeks. As I believe you know, this is a project that's funded both by the City of Tampa and Florida Department of Transportation to look at both the existing streetcar system and potential extensions to the system. We're working closely with HART as the operator of the existing system, and we have a team of consultants that support us from a range of dimensions. Clarence Ng with Kimley Horn is here, Dave Zola with HDR is here. We have members supporting us both on technical and public engagement work for the project. What we're looking at is a project that really takes the streetcar into a position to support downtown's full revitalization. So not just a sort of a side exercise or a side benefit to folks visiting the city, but something that's really part of the daily life of the folks that live and work downtown. We're looking again at both modernization of the existing line and the extension. We are looking at a feasibility level, and we'll be moving into a greater level of detail in phase 2. Options about the vehicles themselves, the costs and benefits of different alternatives, and carefully looking at community impacts as part of a PD&E effort that we'll move into in the next phase of work. And through that effort, we've coordinated closely with the Regional Transit Feasibility Plan process. So we've had a number of meetings to talk about how these two investments, potential regional investments, can fit together and support one another. So again, it's a two-phase project. This first phase we're wrapping up now, which is project feasibility. This is where we developed a purpose and need to look at an appropriate purpose for the project, which you discussed about the Regional Transit Feasibility Plan briefly. We evaluated different alignment options to see what would have the greatest potential to attract riders, to be the best, provide the best cost benefit alignment. We've identified what we believe is this preferred alignment or corridor for the extension. We've developed a preliminary funding and implementation plan, and we're preparing a letter that the city, HART, and DOT will be submitting to FTA, not to ask for funding for the project, but ask to move into the project development phase of work. So in project development, that's a more conventional PD&E level of effort where we drill down in greater detail. We actually start to look at how the tracks and stations fit within downtown, make some detailed recommendations about modernization and extension. We grapple with some of those big questions that we've put off a little bit, like crossing the CSX tracks, for example. So we'll get into that discussion in much greater detail as we move forward. We'll also look at vehicle technology options. So what I'll talk about when we talk about cost is an assumption, a really basic assumption that this is a modern streetcar project, but we will be looking at alternative vehicle technology when we move into the second phase. The second phase would result in a recommendation of funding plan and a recommendation to seek funding from the state and the federal government through, in our case, most likely small starts, but also possibly the Tiger Grant, if Tiger Grants are available to pursue, or other funding streams that might be available at the time. So that we have followed a fairly robust public engagement process. We've had a series of large-scale meetings over the last year. We've had meetings with various groups and organizations, from formal to very informal sessions with neighborhood associations. Our stakeholder group has met several times, and we've had this 5 sort of official transit feasibility plan coordination meetings to make sure that we're sort of up to speed with their efforts, they're up to speed with our work, and we're making that connection as we move forward. We made some broad assumptions and important assumptions about the nature of the service that we would be provided in the existing system and in the extension. So we talked about a future phase of investment that could allow for future extensions. So we're looking at a project now that would go to Tampa Heights, but there's nothing about that that would preclude it from going west to West Shore or Tampa International Airport to go further north, or to loop around to go further east to Ybor. So we're trying to get a scale of investment that seems appropriate for this phase, but that wouldn't preclude a future phase of investment that would stretch it further. We've included modernization of the existing system. We made an assumption that we would be able to extend the system using exclusive guideways so we could bypass congestion, so it wouldn't get caught in some of the traffic issues that we're experiencing now, especially on significant event days. That would have a high frequency of service, so 10-minute to 15-minute headways, basically a level of service that would allow you to wait at a station and not think too much about when the next streetcar is coming. Longer operating hours, so it could pick up commute trips, which the existing system doesn't do. And that, again, for the purpose of the costing that we did, preliminary cost estimating that we did, that it would be a modern streetcar vehicle. So we developed evaluation criteria, looked at the different alignments. We had north-south alignments, loop alignments, east-west alignments. We looked at crossing the river. We looked at some short segments to see if we can hit the core of downtown but not stretch it too far. We compared those across a range of set of metrics, and that detail is online if you want to dig through the numbers and how we translated that into a score. But that resulted in the selection of a north-south alignment running to Tampa Heights, connecting to the Marion Transit Center and connecting to the potential site of a regional transit feasibility or an intermodal center, which DOT is looking at now in more detail. Really the benefits, the significant benefits, is that we access the core of downtown and we stretch to areas that are experiencing significant development. So this could be, the idea is of this project as a one-seat trip that could get you from Tampa Heights to the core of downtown, to Water Street, to Channel District, and to Ybor City. You're not changing vehicles, you're not swapping modes, one trip, and it's a high-capacity trip, primarily on exclusive guideways, so it couldn't bypass congestion through the corridor. In looking at the project, there's about $100 million worth of costs in the extension, so that's the actual physical construction of the extension and stations, plus the new vehicles required to support operations on that extension, and some cost to upgrade the existing maintenance facility. Then the modernization option is we have to smooth out some of those tight turns so larger vehicles can move on those tracks. We've got to upgrade stations. We'd improve service frequency and service hours, and the cost for that with new vehicles to support that service on the existing system is about $70 million. So right now, baking in all those assumptions about the nature of the service and the kind of vehicles, we're at a $170 million project. This is a little more information about the breakdown, and I think I covered the basics of this. We're also looking at a potential annual cost of $6 million. Oh, for the costs, these are 2017 dollars, so there was a question about what costs, are we using for this stage in the study. So these are current dollars that would be obviously inflated as things cost more in the future. But that's the starting point. We use those numbers for comparison across the different alignments to result in this recommendation. When we move into phase 2, we'll go into greater detail with these cost estimates and come up with a tighter number based on actual track layout, station location, vehicle technology, and we'll be able to come back with a much more detailed report on the total costs. So the next step is we move into project development, which would start up after we send this letter to FTA, get some feedback that it looks like a project that's worth supporting through that next stage, not a funding commitment, but at least worth further study. We'll continue the public outreach efforts. We'll provide more detail about the alignment plans, and you can see on the map we're still drawing a Tampa, Franklin, Florida set of possibilities. We'll look much more carefully at the implications of putting a vehicle and stations on each of those streets, put together a hard recommendation about precise alignment. We'll evaluate transit modes, so that would include running the existing replica streetcars on an extension, introducing modern cars, which is what we used in our cost estimate, and looking at rubber tire and autonomous vehicle options. If we can find an autonomous vehicle option that provides the same level of benefit to the community as the streetcar, that could result, this next step in the process could result in that option moving forward. Continued coordination with the Regional Transit Feasibility Plan, with the Intermodal Center conceptual development process that FDOT is kicking off now. Much more detailed look at cost and ridership estimates, impact assessments. We'll go through the exercise of looking at those numbers as they relate to FTA scoring for small starts, and develop that as that'll be part of our developing of a funding plan. So the process now, we look to get into this project development exercise in the next couple months. We can take some advanced steps into that, but we'll be full blown into that in the summer. We'll complete the analysis effort, which is PD&E-like, into next spring. Hopefully this time next year, we would be presenting a recommendation about a funding and implementation plan, and then that would move us into seeking commitments for that funding from local, state, and federal sources, and private sources. The range of opportunities for funding, we would look across the board to see where there's potential participation and how we would align that. This alignment takes us with federal funding as a possible start of revenue service in 2024. So again, as we've talked about across different technologies and options, these things are going to take a little more time, but I think it's key to think about how these streetcar starts to queue up with other regional investments, so we understand how the requests to different requests to FTA or combined requests align and stack up and sort of move us through a next 10 to 15-year cycle. That's all.
Okay, that's it. Any questions?
Real quick, I've always loved the streetcar, but where it stops now at Whiting Station, it's what's holding it back, especially with what's happening in downtown, and as you said, going north to the Heights and whatnot. If we were to extend this to Palm Avenue or further north or whatever, we would see a completely different scenario of how people would be. You'd see ridership boom, I think, because you're touching residential, you're touching the residential in downtown that it's not getting to. Yet, everything that's happening right there on the water with Eulalie and Armature Works and all that. But what I like what you said, and correct me if I misunderstood, this is not the end-all be-all. We can always go west. We can continue expanding it in the future and getting back to a real public transit system with a dedicated lane as a streetcar used to be years ago. But I'm happy to support this, in whatever capacity I can. Of course, we got to get the funding for it, federal level all the way down. But I think it would be a success that people would really welcome, giving them another option that really works besides taking the bus or whatnot, especially in Tampa's core where everything is happening.
Mr. Kemp, recognized.
Thank you. I'd just like to echo Councilman Guido's, Maniscalco's, sorry, comments, right? But I also like to say that I have watched this process. I've been to some of the community engagement that you all have had, and how this has been laid out and done and put forward in the community, I just think is a model. And I thank you for that. I thank you for the clarity of the presentation, for the information and facts, and I just think it's a good project, an important project for the city of Tampa. But also, I'd just like to comment on all the thoroughness of the information and the thoroughness as a process moving forward. I was at those big meetings where they had people with the little counters voting on the 7 options and hearing all the information about them. I just thought it was really excellent.
Mr. Green, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the interest of time, I just had a couple of points of clarification, but I can take those up with our director or this gentleman that I know personally.
Okay. Ms. Sherberg.
2 really quick questions. So the FTA, you're talking about taking it to FTA in now, April 2018, or when would you put it in the pipeline? When would it enter the pipeline?
It's the 2 steps. So this first step is a letter asking for FTA's okay to move into project development. So that's a fairly small hurdle. that just says, yes, the money that you spend in project development could be reimbursed partly by an FTA grant in the future.
Okay.
So it's just that quick sign off. It's not FTA's approval of a project or commitment of any specific fund.
Okay, just think, and I asked that only in terms of what we were talking about before, in terms of sequencing and having multiple things in the pipeline that would jeopardize other projects. So I appreciate that. And then the other thing is you're talking about coordinating with the regional transit feasibility plan. So with this 275 rapid transit, is this accessible from that? Do we know that? Is that something that's been determined, that you'd be able to get off of that and then get onto the streetcar and they intersect? I see that.
The details of that, so the exact mechanics of that haven't been worked out yet, but that's the goal of the project, is that you could, that transfer point has to be as direct and smooth and comfortable and clear as possible for both systems to benefit.
But they all would work together?
Yeah, that's the intent.
Okay.
Mr. Mechanic, you recognize.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Very good presentation. Phase 2 while we don't certainly have public transportation that covers every inch of downtown, I think it's safe to say we do have a little bit of duplication of transportation service. I think you mentioned that at an earlier presentation. Will you be looking at whether there's opportunity to capture more ridership if we investigate and potentially eliminate some duplicative service as part of, I mean, obviously you've got to capture as much revenue as possible. One way to do that would be to eliminate duplicative service. So.
Yeah, that strategy also helps support some of the ridership modeling. If we can say that we're going to pick up convert some trips from an existing service to the new service. But really what drives the ridership numbers is new trips. So that the extension to Tampa Heights helps us pick up the full extension helps us pick up additional trips, which is going to drive that ridership number higher.
And of course, the beauty of the downtowner is it's a totally fluid system. So to the extent you can increase capacity on the streetcar, that system can be adjusted or ratcheted downward to accommodate whatever remaining demand there is.
Yeah, that could be more of a, or sort of figuring out how those different modes support different kinds of trips downtown is really critical. So the downtowner is a trip that's a little bit more ad hoc. It's a little unsteady. It's not a typical, take the same trip every day on the same service, partly because of the weight that you have now. So aligning those trips, and then the in-towner local bus service and how express bus service travels through downtown will be all considered in thinking about our ridership potential.
Very good. Thank you.
Councilman Cohen, you recognize.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of the comments that have been made here, and I agree with Councilman Maniscalco about how enthusiastic we ought to be for the city of Tampa in terms of what this project could mean. But Ms. Scherberger's question is really, in my view, the key question, and that is, how is this going to intersect and coordinate with all sorts of other modes of transportation? The BRT plan would be one, but I would say Tampa Union Station, the cruise ship terminals, if there are going to be ferries coming from downtown, if there's going to be a connection between a downtown intermodal center and West Shore to the airport, this could be the piece that connects all of those things to one another. And so, it's so important when we're looking at the long-range plan and all the other things that are being talked about that we think about how this is going to connect to it. Because to me, this is what makes everything else worth looking at. Because once people get down here, they have to be able to traverse the area and not only rely on parking garages, because we're going to see it tonight, as a matter of fact, that you cannot move through downtown in a car if there are more than 2 events going on at one time. And this would give people the option of parking in city-owned garages all over the area, or taking another public transportation mode into downtown and integrating with this. So there's an awful lot of options that people get just from this one system.
You ought to see him when he really gets excited. Commissioner Merman, you recognize.
I just want to ask a quick question. Is there any thought to modernizing the current streetcar system also?
You mean just independent of an extension?
Well, no, I mean, it's going to connect into what you're proposing in alternative B. But why wouldn't you just throw the modernization of the streetcar line in there too? I mean, I don't know why would you want to have an old system connect to a new system? Why don't you?
No, that's, I think, and if I wasn't clear, I apologize. That's part of the project, is to look at both modernization and extension.
Oh, I didn't hear that.
So if you hopped on
all I
a-
heard was connecting to that.
Ybor City on 8th Avenue, if you hopped on that vehicle, you could traverse the whole system on the same
Okay.
vehicle type,
Same
experiencing the
vehicle
same
type.
vehicle type
Okay,
from one
good.
end to the other.
Okay, good.
There's discussion about not doing that, and there's some interest in thinking about a hybrid sort of system, but right now, our assumption is based on a one-seat trip across the whole system, 10 to
Good.
15-minute headways, same vehicle, full-day service, long full-day service.
Thank you for clarifying.
Ms. Sherberg, you're
I'll be real quick. I just also, to piggyback on what Councilman Cohen said, that this project also would theoretically connect to that, the rapid transit on Florida and Fowler that we're talking about. So point being, it all goes together. So you have sort of your arterial with the streetcar and potentially the Florida Fowler, and then you have your more regional system that's on 275, and it all could potentially come together. So.
Yeah, I think one of the possibilities which we'll be exploring with the other projects is the possibility of a Tampa, Florida guideway that would be shared by these different services, so you could actually slot those together and benefit from that infrastructure investment across a couple different modes.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Executive Director's Report.
Thank you, sir. And a couple of quick announcements. We do have 2 public meetings tonight and tomorrow night about a look at extending the South Coast Greenway north through the Palm River area to connect to a future extension of the Selman Greenway. And so how could that be created in a way that benefits the local community residents? Tonight's meeting is at the 78th Street Community Library, and tomorrow night is at the Gardenville Recreation Center on Sims Road. Both of them 5:30 to 7:30 open houses. We also have a conference that we've co-sponsored with the Coalition of Community Gardens about access to fresh food through developing gardens with walk-bike access. And that is this coming Saturday, and that's going to be at the Tampa Heights Community Center. I wanted to thank a number of you who came out to our board retreat on the 23rd. There is a summary in your blue folders of some of the brainstorming that happened at that March 23rd meeting. Some of the positives, I was real pleased to see comments like staff is responsive, staff is professional, keeps up on best practices, supportive, working as partners. We've got progress in regional cooperation. Staff's open to change and accepting new ideas. So I'm very pleased to have a great team to support you. And I wanted to highlight also a couple of the challenges that were brought up. And I thought the one that really jumped out at me under challenges was we had a number of comments about lack of community consensus, different visions in different areas. There's a lack of consensus among elected officials that reflects the larger constituency. We need to work on public trust. We're all in this together. Build trust and help people understand the bigger mobility picture. And a lot of that was in the context of the discussion about transportation.
That was concerning elected officials?
So, it was countywide, that we have lack of consensus around our community about what should our vision for the future be, and a lot of different ideas about what should our priorities be, and that if we can't come together, it's going to be very tough to address the many challenges that we have. So there was a breakout discussion group that focused on issues of regionalism and what issues do we face at regional levels and how can we better address them. And one of the suggestions was working on transportation funding collaboratively as a way of trying to bring us together. create collaborative agreement on a package that benefits the region and also has the highest probability of initial funding and matching funds. So it has to be a benefit for the people in our community with their many disparate needs and also for the region. And I think that almost perfectly captures the discussion that we just had this morning about the regional transit feasibility plan and what our work is for the coming year and what our major focus should be for the coming year. So I got that message loud and clear. You'll be seeing more of that at our upcoming board meetings and bringing that back at the TMA Leadership Group. And not only on the list of projects, but I think we need to be looking at a parallel effort that is specifically focused on consensus building and outreach and education, and how do we collaborate better with all of the stakeholders in our community. So our next TMA Leadership Group, May 11th, this one is actually going to be in Pasco. This is our first TMA Leadership Group ever meeting in Pasco County. And just to make sure you have it on your calendars, Friday, June the 1st is going to be the second workshop at the St. Pete Collaborative Labs to look at a possible merger of the MPOs in the Tri-County area.
Okay. Any questions? Thank you. Any old business? Any new business? We're adjourned.
No, he's good. He's glass scale 15. Negative on the sample, no allergies, meds, or history.
Hello and welcome to another edition of FSU Headlines, coming to you from the beautiful campus of Florida State University here in Tallahassee. I'm Dennis Schnitker.
And I'm Seshmi Hayes. Our top story this month, Florida State honors a decorated naval officer who made the ultimate sacrifice while serving his country.
For many years, the FSU Tennis Center here on campus has been named for that officer, alumnus Scott Spiker.
But now a new monument and marker here adds details for those unfamiliar with Spiker's story and his fateful mission many years ago.
A 1980 business administration graduate at Florida State University, Scott Spiker went on to serve his country as a U.S. Navy pilot. He died in 1991 when his FA-18 Hornet was shot down on the first night of Operation Desert Storm.